Welcome back to China Jefferson Nickel Dollar 1964 coins $1.9 million dollar coin super. What if I told you that a small 5-cent coin from 1964 could be hiding a story that goes far beyond its face value? A coin that looks ordinary, weighs just a few grams, and was once spent like everyday pocket change can actually represent one of the most important moments in American coinage history. And if you have an old coin collection, a jar of coins, or even a handful of inherited change, you might want to look carefully before you ignore one. Because today on Hardest Penny, we're taking a deep look at the 1964 Jefferson Nickel, the final regular issue Jefferson Nickel struck before the United States Mint made major changes to its nickel production. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will know exactly what to look for, what makes a 1964 nickel interesting, and why some examples can be far more desirable to collectors than others. 1964 Jefferson Nickel. The 1964 Jefferson Nickel is one of the most widely produced nickels in United States history, but its enormous production numbers do not make it boring. In fact, 1964 is a fascinating date because it came during a period when the United States was experiencing a major shortage of coins. Rising demand for circulating money, changes in the economy, and the increasing need for coinage pushed the United States Mint to produce enormous quantities of nickels. The Jefferson nickel was first introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel. The coin was designed to honor Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States and the principal author of the Declaration of Independence. On the front of the coin, Jefferson's portrait faces left, while the reverse features his famous home, Monticello, in Virginia. When you look at a 1964 Jefferson nickel, you will see the word Liberty along the left side of Jefferson's portrait, the date beneath it, and the phrase, "I in God we trust," around the design. On the reverse, you will find United States of America, E pluribus unum, 5 cents, and Monticello. But here is where the 1964 nickel becomes particularly interesting. The year 1964 was the last year before a major change in the composition of the Jefferson nickel. Unlike the 1965 quarter and half dollar, which experienced major silver-related composition changes, the nickel itself remained primarily a copper and nickel alloy. However, because of the national coin shortage, the Mint went to extraordinary lengths to produce huge numbers of nickels. In fact, 1964 nickels were produced in massive quantities at the Philadelphia and Denver mints. Philadelphia coins have no mint mark, while Denver coins carry a small D mint mark on the reverse of the coin to the right of Monticello. And this is something every collector should know. A 1964 Jefferson nickel without a mint mark does not automatically mean it is rare. Many beginning collectors see an old coin without a mint mark and assume that it must be valuable. But Philadelphia traditionally produced coins without mint marks, so the absence of a mint mark is completely normal for a 1964 nickel. The same applies to the 1964 D Jefferson nickel. The D simply tells us that the coin was produced at the Denver Mint. Because so many 1964 nickels were made, ordinary circulated examples are generally not considered extremely rare. You might find one in an old collection, a coin jar, or even among older coins passed down through a family. But that doesn't mean you should ignore them. The condition of a 1964 nickel can make a major difference. Imagine you find two 1964 Jefferson nickels. Both have the same date and the same basic design. One has spent decades circulating through stores, vending machines, pockets, and cash registers. Its surface is dull, Jefferson's hair is worn, and the details on Monticello are weak. The second coin looks almost untouched. The surfaces are bright, the lettering is sharp, Jefferson's portrait has strong detail, and the reverse still shows excellent definition. These two coins may have dramatically different collector appeal. This is because coin collectors care deeply about condition. Coins are graded on a scale that generally ranges from heavily worn examples to extremely high-grade, uncirculated coins. When a common date survives in exceptional condition, it can become much more interesting to serious collectors. This is especially true when the coin has strong original luster and sharp details. One area collectors often examine on Jefferson Nickels is the reverse. Look closely at Monticello and the lettering. On high-grade examples, collectors may pay attention to how clearly the steps beneath Monticello are visible. This is known as the full steps designation. A Jefferson nickel with exceptionally sharp and uninterrupted steps can be more desirable than a similar coin with weak or worn steps. Because the steps are located in a high-contact area of the design, they can become damaged or weak very easily during circulation or even during the minting process. So if you have a 1964 nickel that looks unusually sharp, don't immediately spend it. Take a closer look. Use good lighting and examine the reverse carefully. Look at Monticello. Check the steps. Examine Jefferson's hair and cheek. Look for scratches, contact marks, discoloration, and signs of wear. And there is another important warning. Never clean the coin just because you think it looks dirty. Many people make this mistake. They take an old coin and polish it with a cloth, chemical, toothpaste, or another household product because they want it to look shiny. Unfortunately, cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and may reduce the coin's collector appeal. Natural toning and original surfaces are generally much more desirable than an artificially polished coin. Now, what about errors? This is where the 1964 Jefferson nickel can become especially exciting. During the minting process, mistakes can occasionally happen. Coins can be struck improperly, have unusual die characteristics, or show other legitimate minting errors. Some errors can be collectible, especially when they're dramatic, authentic, and relatively scarce. But collectors need to be extremely careful. Not every strange mark is an error. A scratch is usually just a scratch. A dent is usually damage. A coin that has been damaged after leaving the mint is not automatically a rare mint error. This is why authentication matters when you believe you have something unusual. Another interesting feature of 1964 nickels is their historical connection to the enormous coin production of the mid-1960s. The United States Mint was working under tremendous pressure to meet demand. The nation was experiencing a shortage of circulating coins, and the mint was producing enormous quantities to keep the economy supplied. The result was an extraordinary number of coins. That is why the 1964 nickel is both common and historically important at the same time. You don't need a rare date to have an interesting coin. Sometimes the story behind a common coin is what makes it fascinating. Think about where a 1964 nickel could have traveled. It might have been placed into a vending machine decades ago. It could have been used to buy candy, a newspaper, or another small item. It may have sat inside someone's pocket during a historic period in American life. It could have been stored away by a collector who recognized that the coin represented an important moment in U.S. coinage. And now, decades later, it could be sitting inside your collection. That is the magic of coin collecting. So, how much is a 1964 Jefferson nickel worth? The answer depends heavily on the individual coin. A typical circulated example is generally worth only a modest premium over its 5-cent face value, if any, because so many were produced. But coins in exceptional condition, coins with desirable full steps characteristics, and genuine mint errors can attract stronger collector interest. Proof-like or specially preserved examples can also be worth more depending on their quality and rarity. And this is where many online videos and listings can become confusing. You might see a 1964 nickel advertised online for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. But an asking price is not the same thing as an actual selling price. Anyone can list a coin for an enormous amount. Serious collectors look at actual market evidence, professional grading, condition, rarity, and documented sales. So if you discover a 1964 Jefferson nickel, don't automatically assume that it is worth a fortune, but don't throw it away either. Start by identifying the date. Then check the mint mark. Next, inspect the condition. Look carefully at Jefferson's portrait and the reverse design. Examine Monticello and especially the steps. Search for unusual characteristics that appear to have been created during the minting process rather than through later damage. If the coin appears to be in unusually high condition or has a legitimate looking error, consider having it examined by a reputable coin dealer or professional grading service before making any decision. And remember one final thing: never clean the coin. The original surface is part of the coin's history. The 1964 Jefferson Nickel may not be the rarest coin ever made, but it is a fascinating piece of American history. It represents an era of enormous coin production, economic change, and intense demand for circulating money. A coin that originally bought almost nothing by today's standards can still tell us something valuable about the past. So the next time you see a 1964 Jefferson Nickel, don't just see 5 cents. Look at the date. Look at the mint mark. Look at the condition. Look at Monticello. And most importantly, look at the story. Because sometimes the most interesting coins aren't the ones that immediately look rare. They're the coins that survived decades of everyday life and somehow ended up in your hands. This is Hardest Penny, where we uncover the history, hidden details, and potential value behind the coins that millions of people overlook. So check your old nickels, protect your best examples, and keep searching, because the next coin you find could have a story you never expected. If you want, I can also make the next Hardest Penny coin script more suspenseful and viral, with stronger price reveals and retention hooks, while keeping it around 1,200 words.